Welcome back to the Chattable podcast, where we learn real English in real life, enrich vocabulary, and feel proud. Imagine a world champion tennis player, like a heavy favorite, just suddenly losing to an unranked amateur.
Oh, yeah. That's always wild.
Right. Or, a neighborhood bookstore fighting off this massive corporate takeover. Today, we are decoding the exact language used when giants are pushed to the brink.
Yeah, we're looking at two really powerful phrases that capture the intensity of high-stakes competition and market forces.
Exactly. So consider this episode your toolkit for understanding the underlying drama in business news or sports broadcasts or even, everyday arguments.
And the beauty of these specific phrases is how they take very abstract, invisible concepts like global economics or corporate strategy, and they make them intensely physical.
Yeah, you really feel them.
Right. When you use them, you don't just convey information to whoever's listening. You make them feel the pressure of the situation.
Let's start with a concept that's just dominating the financial news lately. Run up. Two simple words. Run and up.
Yeah, we hear it all the time regarding prices.
Me too. But I want to push back on how broadly this gets used, actually. Like, if a stock jumps from $1 to $10 in a single heartbeat just overnight because of a surprise merger, is that a run-up?
Not at all. And that distinction is vital, right?
Yeah.
A sudden overnight leap is a spike.
A spike, okay.
Yeah, it's sharp, instantaneous, and it really lacks a building process. A run-up requires duration. It is a steady, often rapid, but sustained increase in price or value over a period of time.
Okay, so it's a process.
Exactly. To really grasp it, look at the origin. It borrows from the literal physical exertion of, running up a steep incline.
Oh, like literally running up a hill.
Right. Think about the mechanics of doing that. It requires continuous energy, momentum, and a relentless forward drive against gravity.
You can't just teleport to the top.
Exactly.
So you're looking for an upward trajectory on a chart that mimics a runner taking a hill. But I have to ask, you couldn't use it for unmeasurable things, right? Like, I couldn't say I had a run-up in kindness today.
No, definitely not. It's usually for measurable, trackable things, mostly in business or finance. But yeah, how subjective is that climb?
Right. Like, how long does a price have to climb before analysts call it a true run-up rather than just, a profitable week in the markets?
Well, it's less about a strict number of days and more about the underlying psychology and momentum driving the market.
Okay.
A run-up is usually fueled by anticipation. Look at what happens with tech stocks in the early spring, anticipating strong quarterly earnings.
Oh, sure.
It isn't just a few random trades. Algorithmic trading models detect a slight upward trend. They start buying in, which pushes the price higher.
And then the regular people see it.
Exactly. Retail investors watch that climb. They experience a fear of missing out or FOMO, so they jump in.
So it's like a compounding effect. The climb itself generates more energy for the climb.
Precisely. The price continues to surge because the collective behavior of the market is actively pushing it upward. It's this feedback loop of optimism and capital.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that steady building pressure is what defines the run-up, rather than just a single isolated event.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's look at when a run-up isn't driven by optimism, but by crisis. Because the sources bring up the energy market, which is incredibly susceptible to this.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's say there's a global disruption. We don't just see a spike at the gas pump. Consumers end up bearing the brunt of a relentless run-up in fuel costs.
Right, because energy is the foundation of almost every other industry. When a supply chain is threatened, oil refineries and commodities traders begin hoarding futures.
They're anticipating scarcity.
Exactly. And that anticipation creates a daily mounting pressure on the price per barrel.
And the downstream effects are just brutal. If you're running an airline, jet fuel is one of your largest operating expenses.
Oh, for sure.
You're suddenly facing an uncontrollable, sustained surge in costs. Every day, the hill gets steeper.
And airlines operate on notoriously thin margins anyway. They try to hedge their fuel costs, but if a run-up goes on long enough, those hedges expire, or they just fail to cover the gap.
So they're just losing money.
Yeah. The company's cash reserves start burning just to maintain normal operations. The consumer eventually feels it in ticket prices, but initially, the corporation bears the brunt of that climb.
And we see this exact dynamic on a smaller, more individual scale with real estate, too.
Oh, definitely.
The sources detailed a guy named Marcus who was wanting to sell his condo. And he didn't just list it blindly. He watched the local market dynamics.
Right, he was paying attention.
Yeah, he noticed a massive run-up in housing prices in his specific neighborhood, maybe driven by like a new tech headquarters opening nearby, bringing in a flood of high-paid workers.
Marcus's situation perfectly illustrates the strategic side of navigating a run-up. In real estate, a run-up creates a seller's market characterized by bidding wars.
Because everyone is panicking.
Right. Buyers see the sustained climb and panic, thinking if they don't buy today, they won't be able to afford the neighborhood tomorrow.
FOMO again.
Exactly. Marcus capitalized on that irrational exuberance. He waited for the momentum to build, timing his sale to hit the market right before that run-up reached its absolute peak.
Which is, like, the hardest thing to predict. Identifying the peak of a run-up is the holy grail for investors.
It really is.
If you buy in too late, you're catching the stock or the real estate market right before gravity takes over and the momentum collapses.
And that collapse is the inherent danger of any run-up. By definition, a hill eventually has a top. The energy required to sustain that upward momentum is immense.
So when the money runs out.
When the capital or the optimism runs out, the correction can be violent.
Okay, so let's follow that thread. What happens to the people or the businesses caught on the wrong side of that correction?
Well, it's not good.
Right. If an airline can't manage that relentless run-up in jet fuel costs, they start bleeding money. They go from trying to turn a profit to simply fighting to keep the lights on.
They're pushed to the brink of collapse.
Exactly. They are, in competitive terms, on the ropes. Our second phrase.
Yes, on the ropes. It is a profound shift in posture. When a business or an individual is on the ropes, they are no longer on the offensive.
They're just surviving.
Right. They're in a highly vulnerable defensive position, struggling to survive an onslaught. The phrase comes directly from the sport of boxing, and the imagery is just incredibly stark.
Okay, picture the architecture of a boxing ring. It isn't an open field, right? It's a confined square, enclosed by thick, heavy ropes.
And that physical confinement is the core of the metaphor. Imagine a tired or battered fighter absorbing heavy blows from their opponent.
Their natural instinct is to back away, right? To create distance and recover.
Exactly. But because the ring is small, they can only retreat so far before their back hits the boundary. They are physically trapped against the ring's ropes, unable to move backward, forced to absorb the punishment.
It's the absolute limit of retreat. The ropes are literally the only thing keeping them from falling out of the ring entirely.
It's a desperate spot.
But just to clarify, the severity of the phrase, "this isn't for minor daily inconveniences," if Sarah can't find her car keys, she isn't on the ropes.
No. That's just a bad morning.
Right. It must be a real threat of total failure. And obviously you shouldn't use it literally just because someone is leaning on a fence.
Yeah, please don't do that. It's a metaphor for being close to defeat. But let's trade some examples across different fields to show how versatile this is. Let's look at sports first.
Okay, there was that tennis match in Madrid from the sources.
Yes. Elena Rybakina, the world number 2, an absolute powerhouse. She steps onto the court against an unknown player ranked outside the top 50.
On paper, that shouldn't even be a contest.
Right. The expectation is total dominance. But the unranked player comes out swinging. They get locked into this grueling 60-plus minute tiebreaker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the unknown player actually takes the first set, suddenly having her on the ropes before the quarterfinals.
The world number 2, on the ropes. Think about the psychological weight of that. She wasn't physically trapped, but she was trapped by the momentum.
Exactly. No matter how dominant a giant is, the right pressure can push them to the brink.
And we see that same vulnerability in business. The sources gave the example of Victor, who runs a small software company.
Right, Victor.
His business is doing well, and then a massive competitor launches a cheaper app.
That is the corporate equivalent of taking a heavy punch to the jaw.
Yeah.
Victor's company cannot compete on a price-to-price basis.
Right, they don't have the cash.
No. So within weeks, Victor's software company is firmly on the ropes. They are bleeding cash and out of obvious options to retreat.
But, you know, being on the ropes doesn't always mean it's over. Look at the local bookstore example.
Oh, that's a great one. A classic David and Goliath scenario.
Yeah. A neighborhood shop that's been around for decades. Suddenly, a giant warehouse opens nearby with massive discounts. The local shop is immediately on the ropes.
Right, because if they try to match prices, they go bankrupt.
Exactly. So they survived by changing the game. They started hosting community events, local author readings, book clubs. They stopped fighting a price war.
And it worked. They bounced back from the ropes. They survived because they understood that being on the ropes forces you to innovate or die.
It's such a powerful narrative. And it applies to arguments, too, like a formal debate.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources mention Brenda. By the third round of her debate, she started asking these really clever, piercing questions.
She was intellectually cornering her opponent.
Yes, every question cut off another escape route. By the end of that round, Brenda had her opponent entirely on the ropes.
It's that feeling of being trapped in a rhetorical corner.
There is nowhere left to pivot.
Right. That visceral feeling is exactly why these phrases "run up and on the ropes" have escaped finance and boxing to become just essential parts of our everyday language.
They really let us communicate complex dynamics so simply.
Yeah, using a run-up for periods of increasing prices or activity, and on the ropes for desperate, failing positions. It makes your English sound so much more vivid and precise.
It really does. It's about turning the abstract into the concrete. And, well, that brings us to the end of today's episode.
It went by fast.
It did. We've explored the exhausting, sustained climb of a run-up and the desperate, cornered reality of being on the ropes. But as we sign off, we want to leave you with a specific question from the source material to ponder today.
Yeah. Think about this one.
When you hear someone is on the ropes, do you immediately think they're going to lose, or do you think they still have a chance to fight back?